Hey there, Brad from 4Player Network. These might not be my top 10 games this year, but these are certainly my favorite underappreciated gems that I know a lot of you have not played yet. First up on my list of underappreciated gems is a little gem called Dendara. I don't know many people who played this game, but I will say in a year of a lot of new Metroidvanias. In fact, there was a month people were even calling Metroidvania month. But at the very beginning of the year, this little game called Dendara came out, and it might not be the best or longest or deepest Metroidvania to come out in 2018, but it is certainly the most unique, I think. And the reason it's unique is because you can't just walk around the world. Every movement you make is a jump to another position. So you're kind of jumping around this world in spots that allow you to jump to. So it's very different and very restrictive and very strange at first. But then you realize that they do some clever stuff with the way both the world and enemies are designed, and there's this tension between moving and attacking when you have an incoming enemy or an incoming enemy bullet coming towards you, because you can't just walk out of the way. You have to jump out of the way, and your jumps have to be more or less planned, because you can't just hit the jump button and expect to go somewhere. The other thing, you combine that with the fact that your types of attack have a little bit of a delay. There's like a build-up. You have to charge it for a split second before you can fire. It means every single time you move or shoot, it has to be planned and calculated, because you can't rely on just shooting and moving based purely on reflex. And it creates this very different sort of mentality, this different loop when you're both in combat and moving around the world through hazards, because it's different. It's like when we first played Dark Souls, and you couldn't just go up and wail on a dude. You had to think about it, because it'll drain all your stamina. It's just sort of a new way to think about moving around a world, especially one filled with lots of enemies and lots of traps and tricky platforming. It really is a fresh take on what is probably an oversaturated genre at this point, and that's why it stood out enough to make my list. Next up is another unique Metroidvania this year. It is Yokos Island Express. It has a strange name, and it is a bit of a strange game. It is another Metroidvania. I told you there's a lot of Metroidvanias this year, but the twist on this one is that it has a heavy injection of pinball. I don't really know what to call it. I mean, it's not like you're playing a game on a pinball table, but you have this big explorable world, and you flick your guy around by hitting like the left or right trigger, which are different bumpers in the world. Now, there'll be times where you're on kind of a traditional looking pinball area where you're trying to hit various things to progress to the next area, but a lot of the time you're just kind of strolling around the world like you would in any Metroidvania. You just have little flipper pads all throughout the world to kind of flip you around in cool ways, and you get a lot of other mechanics too. It is a Metroidvania. You're not only flipping your dude around with the paddles. It really, I mean, if you took out the pinball mechanic, it would just seem like any other Metroidvania. But the pinball mechanics are what's really this game's strength, because it's not. You'd think it would be maybe like an easy sort of thing, but you have to be good at pinball to be successful in a lot of these areas, because if you're just mashing on the flippers, you're not going to get to where you need to go. You have to actually kind of wait till your little ball that's pushed by a little bug is lined up on the paddle at the right point before you hit it to get exactly where you need it to go. In fact, playing Yoku's Island Express has made me respect actual pinball play, because I was kind of one of the dudes who just mashed on the buttons to flip the paddles, but I guess good pinball players know what they're doing, and they're actually trying to hit very specific things in certain orders. So it's just sort of a fun, light, breezy, unique take on a Metroidvania game, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. It just also has a nice look and a pretty nice soundtrack. Just go out and play it. Play all the games on this list, damn it, that's the point. The next game on my list I find a little surprising, because Pit People was developed by the Behemoth. They're sort of a darling indie developer, the people what made Castle Crashers, which was a huge indie hit. So I was a little disappointed that I couldn't find many people who were playing this game or talking about this game when it finally came out. And at first I thought maybe it had to do with, the fact that it's not a platformer anymore, it's not a brawler anymore, it's a tactics game. But then when I started playing it, I realized all the great aspects of all of Behemoth's games are here. It's bright, it's colorful, it has this crazy art style and a wonderful sense of humor. It really is probably the funniest game I played this year. But on the tactics side, they kind of went, the extra, they were really trying to take a game like Advance Wars or like a Final Fantasy Tactics and do something that is accessible and is quick. You have battles with lots of units, but you're getting through your turns very quickly because of the way they designed it. And at first I thought, well, that's cool, but it's probably going to be a little simple. In fact, you move your units, and say you move your guy next to 2, and it just sort of randomly chooses which one you attack. Or if you have an archer, it just attacks the closest unit. I was a little bummed at this at first, but then I realized there's this whole meta layer of tactics going on where it's not about it's all about positioning of both your team and the enemy, and what happens is you start making decisions where I don't want this unit to attack both of them, so I'm going to position him over here so he only attacks the one that he's strong against. Or you might position your archer in such a way to where it's closest to the one you want to attack, and it becomes this dance of your units and then the enemy's units and then your units, and there's this kind of this unique flow throughout battle, and it's sort of a tactical experience that I had not had before. Surprisingly fun, and then at the same time you're laughing your ass off. It really is these two flavors that you wouldn't think would go good together, but are actually surprisingly dope. It's one of the cooler games I played this year, and it boggles my mind that more of you didn't try it. Try this game, damn it. Try it, Pit People. It's good. At number 7, we have 7 Billion Humans. It's funny because I did get a few of my fellow podcast members to play this game, but outside of them, I had really not heard many people playing this game. The reason it was initially on my radar is because this game and the previous game, which came out a couple years ago called Human Resource Machine, are developed by the people who made World of Goo, which is one of my very favorite indie games of all time. But these games are not really like World of Goo. They're sort of these puzzle games where you're solving these challenges involving, manipulating numbers and stuff with your little dudes, but you move your little dudes around via simple programming mechanics like if statements and loops and stuff like that. And it is surprisingly cool. It's challenging, certainly. I took a little bit of computer science when I was in college, but I'm certainly no fucking expert. So it was a struggle kind of getting back into it. But once I really got going, I was enjoying this game for some of the same reasons I would enjoy, completing, a program before, where you're inputting a lot of lines of code, and when you hit play and it works, and it finally works after so many failed attempts, it just feels glorious. And I don't think you have to have any sort of like real programming background or anything to enjoy this game, because I mean, look at me. I switched out of computer science for a reason. So just think of it like a puzzle game, and you'll find yourself really kind of getting hooked and satisfied in ways that maybe other video games couldn't in 2018. And it still has the cool visual style and quirky humor of, stuff like World of Goo and Little Inferno. It really is just this underappreciated gem that so many people just kind of ignored. Try it, it's good. Next on my list is Onrush, which, despite the fact that this very recently came to PlayStation Plus, I still feel is probably underappreciated and unfortunately underplayed this year. This is the first game from a bunch of the guys that got let go from Evolution Studios, the people that made MotorStorm under Sony, and they're kind of making a spiritual successor to MotorStorm of sorts. At least that's what I thought it was at first. But then when I found out how this game works, I was actually quite surprised. So I definitely wanted to give it a try. Onrush is not a racing game, because racing involves you trying to get ahead of the other vehicles to get to a destination and win the race. There is no end to a race. There is no reason to be ahead of anybody else, because this is a team-based, objective-based driving game. People have been comparing it to Overwatch or even like a MOBA in some ways, because it's 5-on-5. There are AI controlled vehicles on the battlefield that just exist to power up your special meter, your ultimate, if you will. So you're just kind of knocking these dudes out of the way to fill your meter, and you're not trying to get in first, because you have objectives like King of the Hill style objectives where there's a moving, area on the track, and you're just trying to get the most of your teammates in this one spot, to get the point. It's a points based game, and they do a really good job of creating all these different classes of vehicles that have all kinds of different abilities and perks. Some which really buff your teammates, and then you have these special ultimates which could do all kinds of crazy things. Like one class type will drop walls down behind him, so if you're following behind him, you'll start running into these walls, and then the whole opposite team can run into the wall. Or you'll have people which will shoot out streams behind them which can blind the other players. So it's this really unique, fun, arcadey take on something that isn't strictly racing. It's a fun, objective-based, team-based, game. If you like something like Overwatch, maybe try this. It's a similar type of thing, but you're on wheels, and it still has the crazy, satisfying physics and track design of a game like MotorStorm. It's just something new. It's really cool. More people should try Onrush. Next up at number 5, we have the underplayed and misunderstood Chasm. Yes, this is another Metroidvania, another Kickstarter success, and unsurprisingly, it's a game that I really, really enjoyed. I love the genre. I love Metroid, and I love Castlevania. I love all these other games. But the reason I think excuse the slip. The reason Chasm is so successful is because more than any other Metroidvania game I've ever played, this one nails what was so addictive and satisfying about something like Symphony of the Night and other Igavanias that came afterwards. There was a focus on loot, and not just loot, but rare drops from enemies and unique loot that would come from that. Symphony of the Night could probably be beaten in 10 hours or whatever, but I would play that game for 30-40 hours because there was so much hidden crazy stuff that you can find. It just required the effort to track down these enemies to get the rare loot. Chasm understands that. It has that. It has that secret shit. All the bosses have these special weapons that you can only get that if you can kill them without taking a hit. And Chasm is not an easy game. But I got those because I heard they were crazy, and sure enough, these weapons were super like powerful and cool and different, and I absolutely adored Chasm for that reason. Other than that, it seems like a pretty standard, Metroidvania in the way you kind of move around, but it has the combat style of a Castlevania game. It has the thing where if you attack, you stop in place. So if you want to keep moving after an attack, the way you do it is in the air. And you can also cancel that attack by landing and do another attack. So you can do like double attacks as you're landing, or you can attack in the air and as soon as you land, like backdash or jump again and just keep it going. It's the exact same combat mechanics, if you will, of the those Igavanias, and I missed it. I adored it. This was like the most comfortable shoe that I put on all year, because I knew exactly what this was as soon as I started playing it, and I loved Chasm for the same reasons I love Symphony of the Night. It might not quite have hit all the highs. You get, you're not turning into a bat, or you don't get some of the crazier spells and stuff like you do in Symphony of the Night, but there are familiars that level up, that attack faster and do more damage as you level up. It has some of those direct nods to Symphony of the Night, and oh man, more people should try Chasm. This one got a little bit bashed by critics, but I think some people misunderstood it. I think they just sort of critical pathed it and didn't kind of poke around and find some of the crazier stuff in this game. If you picked it up and put it down, give it a chance, because I really do think it deserves another look. Also, has a really good soundtrack. 4 on my list is one I will have to explain. Because the reason it's an underappreciated gem is because I don't think a lot of people understand exactly what this is. It's Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. This is not the big, Igarashi Bloodstained that was kickstarted, that was, hugely successful, made a ton of money, and we're still waiting to come out. It's not that. It's not the spiritual successor to Symphony of the Night. This was a stretch goal that once they made so much money, and they promised that they would make a classic style. They make a Bloodstained game in the style of a classic Castlevania game. That's what this is. This is a spiritual successor to Castlevania 3 on the NES. It looks, it sounds, it plays like an old school Castlevania. When you jump in the air, you're committed to that jump. You can't stop. You can't steer your dude in the air. If you jump. If you mistime your jump, you'll fall into a goddamn hole. It's that style of game. But Curse of the Moon is sort of that style of game, but for, updated a little bit, tweaked a little bit to make it a little more accessible. Those old Castlevania games were notoriously difficult, and it's why I didn't fall in love with Castlevania until Symphony of the Night, until they turned it into a Metroid style game. But here you got that classic style, and the reason it works for me is not just because you could switch between multiple characters, because you could do that in Castlevania 3, but because it's not as punishing when you die. Now, if you go into a level with 4 different dudes and you die, you don't immediately lose your life. It's still life-based, but what happens is that dude is just dead. So you can still attempt that level from the checkpoint you were at with the other 3 characters. But the reason that that's interesting is because you sort of have different characters in this game for different situations, right? Not just like explicit like puzzles, like areas that only certain characters can get into, but like certain combat situations where you might be comfortable using one type of character versus another. But when one of those characters dies, all of a sudden you're looking at this situation of this horrible situation, because this game can be quite difficult from another perspective. You might be down to the little old man who only has powerful spells. But once you're out of spells, you're fucked. I mean, he's sort of the Sypha, from Castlevania 3. But then getting through a challenging area with only your little, old dude left and making it to the next checkpoint was like super satisfying. It's sort of this, it sort of took that idea and made it more from the NES and made it more fun. It's just one of the best and most surprising, game I played this year, and a lot of people didn't play it because they didn't really understand that this was like a full-blown game. And honestly, even if that full, Bloodstained game, Ritual of the Night, comes out and isn't good, I will be happy that we at least got this game because of this Kickstarter, because it's that good. More people should try it. It's inexpensive. Just play this game. It's really cool. Number 3 on my list is Overload. A terrible name, but a pretty great game. This is a spiritual successor to Descent 2, which were the 90s, classic shooters, but, the twist was you have 6 degrees of freedom. You're flying around, you're twisting around, you're doing barrel rolls, and you're going through these very labyrinthine levels with lots of secrets, and where you don't really know what up and down is anymore, but it doesn't matter because you have so much freedom of control. And my God, they absolutely nail what was great about Descent. It might have something to do with the fact that I think some of those developers actually worked on this project, but I will say, if you listen to our award show, I gave Overload, I think, my best feeling game of 2018 because it feels so good to play. I played this game with the controller, and it just zipping around and twisting around just felt so good in this game. And it doesn't just feel good to move around these very tricky environments. It's that you have like all these different types of missiles and all these different types of like fire, and it all feels so good. And the way the enemies like get bounced around and like explode and particles like fly everywhere. It's just such a joy to kill things in this game and to move around and zip around, dodging enemy attacks while you do it. This is a game that I think maybe if you just sort of zipped through the end of a stage and got to the level exit, kind of like old classic shooters like Doom or whatever, you might be missing the point. Onrush also nails the quality level design of those games because there are so many hidden, tricky secrets in these stages. These are levels that you could probably finish in like 5 minutes if you were just in a hurry, but I would spend 30 minutes exploring them, come out on the other end, and only have not even half the secrets that were hidden in that level. And I love that style of design. It's absolutely wonderful. They just nailed Descent in Descent 2 so well. You have to try this game. Just put your hands on it, feel how it is to move around, and then go hunting for secrets, because that's what you do in Overload. Damn, it's good. My number 2 game is Wandersong, and I will say it is a crime that more people have not tried this game. A crime that you should be arrested for, because this is such a wonderful, delightful, positive game. If you've ever played like Night in the Woods, you kind of understand what this game is, where the hook is kind of the writing and talking to people, meeting these crazy characters. It's very much that style of game. But the twist is that you're a bard and you sing anytime you want. You could just bust out into song. You could bust out into a dance. You learn all these different dances, and so when you're in conversations and stuff, you could just start singing. You could just start dancing, because that's what your character does. He loves life, and he loves singing, and he loves dancing. It's wonderful. But the game also creates a lot of really cool like challenges and like platforming tricks and stuff that revolve around you using your little singing wheel, your singing voice to like move around the world. You'd be surprised. There's dozens and dozens of clever ways that they implement the singing mechanic in this game. And the platforming is not super challenging, and it's honestly doesn't feel all that great to do, but you don't care because there's so much heart behind this game, and it's not the focus of the game. The focus is the story, it's the characters, it's the relationships, and it's just the fucking effervescence of this game. God damn it, it's so delightful. It's so goddamn delightful. Wandersong, man. I've been told that I've never seen Adventure Time, but I've been told that this game has a lot of Adventure Time DNA in its personality, and maybe that means something to you. It doesn't mean much to me, but I love this dude. It's so positive. There's a lot of deep messages here, but nothing too crazy. It's just the fucking video game we need right now, goddammit. Play Wandersong. It is a goddamn delight. It's got some of the best music of the year. It's just, which, you know, you need in a game that's about singing and music. It's absolutely wonderful. It's colorful, it's bright. Don't be turned off by the simple graphics, because there is a lot going on in this game. You know, you sing and the world comes to life in a lot of cool ways. I love Wandersong so much. Oh my god, Wandersong. Play it, damn it, play it. My number one most underappreciated, underplayed, hidden gem of 2018 is Crosscode, and god damn it, I discovered this one way too late. I haven't actually completed this game, but it left such a strong impression on me that it made it number one on this list of underappreciated games. And I'm pretty certain that if I had finished Crosscode, it would have been near the top of my top 10. It really bumps me out, but I put it here because y'all need to know how cool this thing is. It is an action RPG. You know, you look at footage, you see the pixel art, and you're like, okay, I've seen this kind of game. But no, you haven't, man. It's fucking crazy. It has the Zelda dungeons that you would expect from like good Zelda games, filled with so many puzzles where you're like scratching your head, and it's so satisfying to figure out. And you're in these dungeons for fucking hours. It's not like one of those later, you know, Zelda games where you can get through like a dungeon in half an hour. No, you're in these things for fucking hours because they're tricky, and this game is challenging, and it's satisfying, it's rewarding. Oh, the combat in this game is no simple Zelda combat either. You are ripping through dudes, popping like specials. It just feels good to just run and kill things. If honestly, it feels like an East game. That's how like fast and satisfying it is to like hit and kill things and to, you know, use those special abilities. So you have the dungeon design of a Zelda game with the combat of an East game, but it's all surrounded with this really like well put together story and world where you're in an MMO. And I know we've played games like that before, like Dot Hack or whatever, but you're a character who's playing a MMO style game with other people. And you know, this is a single player game, but they honestly make it feel like you are playing a game with real people because of the writing and the characters, the party members. It's so cleverly written, and you feel like if you've ever played a type of online game, there's a lot of nostalgia for that stuff, and they really nail the way people talk to each other in these games, and the little things that you know make playing an MMO unique. Oh god, I really adore this game. The loot system is really cool. Like the skill tree is fucking huge. It's like a sphere grid. You know, this game is so much like deeper and like more challenging and surprising. Like I was not expecting this to be like a monster of a game. This is like a 50-60 hour JRPG with like a good story, good combat, good dungeons, and one last thing I'll say is like they do this thing that is probably the most unique thing in Crosscode, in which they, even though they're designing a game that kind of looks like an isometric, you know, game, you know, like a Secret of Mana or like a Zelda style game on the surface, there's a lot of verticality on each screen because, you know, they build all these like cliff sides and they build them up, and sort of getting around and like jumping around and finding your way up these environments to find, you know, secrets and items and chests and stuff it's different. Like you've never really done anything in this style of game, to have a game where you're looking down but have it still feel really like vertical. It's crazy how they do it, and it's a little strange at first, but once you get used to it, you're just zipping through this world, finding so much hidden stuff. Oh, it's so good. I fucking love this game. I love this game, and I regret I didn't play it when it came out, and I'm regretting that I'm not telling most of you until you hear this fucking video, because you should have played it back then, because it would have been on all our lists. This was the Hollow Knight of fucking 2018, but I'm worried that it might not get that Switch port, because you know, the way it was coded, it might not happen. It might be too late, but fucking play this game, spread the word. Let's get those ports, because god damn it, more people need to know about this. Ah, fucking Crosscode. I love this shit. Anyways, that's gonna do it. Those are my gems of 2018. And I know a lot of you are feeling ashamed and terrible right now because you just saw all these dope looking games that you may have ignored, but there's still time. Just because it's 2019 doesn't mean you can't play these games. We'll all get to Kingdom Hearts 3. Basically what I'm saying is you better play Crosscode because I'm fucking watching you.